old king knelt on a hillside. The grandson he had once ordered, killed in the cradle, now stood before him as conqueror, and he let the old man live. His name was Cyrus. How does a man who takes everything come to be loved by the people he took it from? He spent 20 years building the largest empire the world had ever seen, doing this same thing in city after city. In the end, on a steppe he had no need to enter, he would forget why. What changed in him out there, on a riverbank in Central Asia, when he tried to do the one thing he had refused to do for 30 years? And what he left behind that, 25 centuries on, we are still living inside. He was born around 600 BC in a stone-walled town in the highlands of Fars. Its name was Anshan, and the name was old. For 1,000 years and more, it had been the eastern reach of Elam, the kingdom to the west, whose capital, Assyria, had broken half a century before Cyrus was born. The town sat on a high plateau between the Zagros Mountains and the Great Salt Plain. Goat-hair tents, small palaces of mud brick and timber. The Persians at that time were nobody in particular. They paid tribute to the Medes, the larger kingdom to the north. They rode well, drew the bow well, and they taught their boys, Herodotus says, 3 things and 3 only: to ride, to draw the bow, to tell the truth. His father was Cambyses, king of Anshan. His mother Mandane was a daughter of Astyages, the Median king to the north. 2 courts ran in his blood. One was rough. Persian kings ate the same meal as their soldiers, slept in goat-hair tents, and did not have fixed capitals. The other court was old and rich and weary of itself. His grandfather Astyages sat in Ecbatana under the snow line of Mount Alvand. There was silver in his treasury, lions in his park, informers in every corridor. Here, Herodotus tells a story. Most historians today call it legend, but the legend is part of who Cyrus became. It begins with a dream. The old king saw his daughter Mandane in his sleep. A vine grew out of her body and covered all of Asia. The court diviners gave him a flat reading. Her son would take his throne. When the child was born, he sent the order down: kill the baby. The man at court he trusted with the order was named Harpagus. Harpagus could not do it. He gave the child to a shepherd with the order to expose the boy on the mountain. The shepherd's wife had buried a stillborn son that same week. They kept Cyrus. They raised him as theirs. 10 years went by before the truth came out. Astyages did not punish Harpagus the obvious ways. He invited him to dinner. He gave him the place of honor next to the throne. And in the middle of the meal, very quietly, he told him what he had just eaten. It was his own son. Harpagus said nothing. He bowed. He kept his place at court. He waited. Cyrus grew up at Anshan in his father's court, hearing 2 languages at the table and eating 2 kinds of bread. His mother's people, the Medes, he knew as rich and tired. His father's Persians as poor and patient. In 559 BC, his father died, and he took the throne. He was about 40, not the young prince of the legend, a grown man, a husband, already a father himself, already the head of a clan that had been waiting 2 generations for its moment. In the spring of 553, 6 years later, he stopped sending tribute to Ecbatana. Astyages marched south to bring his grandson to heel. To lead the army against him, Astyages put Harpagus in command, never suspecting the man still hated him for the banquet. In secret, Harpagus had already reached out to Cyrus. He swore him his loyalty, and promised that he and part of the Median army would come over to his side. When the two armies finally met, 3 years on, Astyages' own troops mutinied in the field. They bound their king with their belts. They brought Astyages forward in the Persian camp, on foot, in chains. He had ruled the Medes for 35 years. This was the hillside we began with, the first decision of his life as a great king. The Persians expected him to do what conquerors did, take the eyes of the old man, or his hands, or his head. He let Astyages live, kept him at court until the old man died there. Herodotus is careful with this detail. He says only that Cyrus did him no harm. Harpagus stood a step away, watching. He had bowed at that banquet long ago. He had waited 40 years for this moment, and now he understood what kind of king he had bet his life on. Within 10 years, the same kind of choice, made over and over, would harden into the way. An entire empire was built. 3 campaigns, 3 mirrors, the same man making the same choice 3 times. Each time, you see him a little more clearly. The first mirror. Croesus, king of Lydia. Lydia was the richest kingdom in the Western world. Its capital, Sardis, sat on a high cliff above a river called the Pactolus that washed gold dust out of the mountains. Its king had minted the first coins anywhere. He owned chariots inlaid with ivory. Year after year, he sent gold to the oracle at Delphi in cartloads. When the Median Empire fell, Croesus understood his own place in the order of things. He would be next. In the spring of 547 BC, he crossed the border river, the highlands, and struck first. He had asked the oracle at Delphi first. What would happen if he attacked? The oracle, Herodotus tells us, gave him a sentence. If Croesus crossed the highlands, he would destroy a great empire. Croesus did not stop to ask which one. They met first in the highlands of Cappadocia, a draw. Croesus pulled back to Sardis for the winter and sent his mercenaries home. Cyrus did not pull back. He marched his army through the winter mountains. He came down on a capital that no longer had its mercenaries. And on the plain, before the walls, he put his baggage camels at the front of the line. Lydian cavalry was the finest in the world. Lydian horses had never smelled a camel. Herodotus says the horses simply refused. They reared. They threw their riders. The line of Croesus collapsed. Sardis itself sat on a red cliff above the river. It held for 14 days. Then a single Persian soldier saw a Lydian helmet bounce down a sheer rock face. He watched a man scramble back up after it. He understood. There was a path. That night, a small Persian column climbed where no guard had been set, opened a gate from inside, and Sardis was finished. The Persians dragged Croesus before Cyrus in chains. Cyrus had a pyre built. 14 Lydian boys were bound on it beside their king. The wood was lit. Croesus, in the smoke, called out a name 3 times, Solon. Cyrus had been standing apart. He walked closer.
Tell me, who is this man you call?
Croesus told him. Years before, an Athenian named Solon had visited Sardis. He had come to see the richest court in the world for himself. Croesus had walked him through the treasury, the army, the throne, and he had asked Solon, in his judgment, who was the happiest man on earth. Solon had named an obscure Athenian farmer, a man who had died well in battle. He had told the king,
"No man is happy while he lives. Only when his life is finished can we judge it."
Cyrus listened. Herodotus says he understood at once that he was a man no greater than the man on the pyre, and that his own life was not yet finished. He ordered the fire put out. By then, the wood was burning hard. The Persians could not quench the flames in time. The Greek storytellers tell it differently. Croesus prayed aloud to Apollo. A sudden storm came over the mountain. The pyre went out on its own. Whatever put it out, Croesus came down alive. From that day until his death, he sat at Cyrus's right hand. Remember Solon's warning? We will come back to it. The second mirror, the East. Bactria, Sogdiana, Margiana, the oasis cities and the river plains beyond them. We have almost no story for these years because none of the great writers got that far. We know Cyrus rode further east than any king of the Near East had ever ridden. He crossed the Oxus into the country of the nomads. Towns from the foothills of the Hindu Kush down to the southern edge of the Aral Sea began sending him tribute. The Assyrians had always depopulated whole provinces. The Babylonians had always pulled down the temples and carried the gods away. Cyrus left the local governors where he found them, kept the old systems running underneath his own, and the empire spread eastward with almost no army of occupation behind it. Caravans came in from beyond the Pamirs, through the oases of Margiana, carrying jade and silk from a country no Persian had ever seen. At the foot of the Hindu Kush, Bactrian smiths beat their bronze into mirrors. The cities did not burn. The gods stayed in their temples. The third mirror, Babylon. By the autumn of 539 BC, Babylon remained the largest and richest city in the world. Its king Nabonidus had spent most of his reign sulking in a desert oasis, quarreling at a distance with the priests of Marduk, the city's chief god. The priests had been writing letters to Cyrus. On the 16th of Tashritu, the 12th of October, a column of Cyrus's army, led by a turncoat governor named Ugbaru, entered Babylon without a single sword being drawn. The Nabonidus Chronicle gives the dry version. Ugbaru, governor of Gutium, and the army of Cyrus entered Babylon without battle. Herodotus, 4 generations later, gives the romantic one. The Persians dug a side channel, he says. They lowered the Euphrates until the river running through the city stood only thigh deep. Then they walked along its bed at night. The Babylonians, deep in a festival, were dancing and drinking and did not know for hours that anything had happened to their city. The two stories fit. The Chronicle gives the political frame. The Greek gives the tactical scene. The same night told from two different sides of the wall. Cyrus himself did not enter the city for another 17 days. He waited. When he came in, on the 29th of October, the streets had been swept and green branches lay in front of him. He went to the great temple of Esagila. He took the hand of the statue of Marduk in the old Babylonian ceremony. A few weeks later, he commissioned a small clay cylinder, 45 lines of cuneiform. In it, Marduk speaks first and chooses Cyrus, and the new king of Babylon describes himself with the formula every Babylonian king had used, and after it, the line his fathers had used in Anshan, king of the 4 quarters of the world, king of Babylon, son of Cambyses, king of Anshan. Ugbaru did not live to see his work finished. He was the general who had walked the army into Babylon under quiet streets, and inside 3 weeks, he was dead. The records call it an unrecorded illness. You will hear the cylinder called the world's first declaration of human rights. The historians who actually read the Akkadian see something simpler and stranger. In form, it is a perfectly ordinary Mesopotamian foundation deposit, the kind of document Babylonian kings had been writing for 15 centuries. What is unusual is the policy underneath it. Cyrus kept the Babylonians where they were. he left the temples standing. He sent the captured gods of other peoples home to their own cities, and he gave one small subject community, sitting in exile on the canals south of Babylon, permission to go home and rebuild the temple in their own capital. The Babylonian records call them the people of Yahudu. We know them in our own tradition as the Jews. The prophet who wrote about their return called him by a title no Hebrew had ever before applied to a foreigner, the Anointed of the Lord. He had understood, in a way no king before him had at the scale of an empire, that a priesthood praying for his reign was worth more than the price of returning a few statues to their temples. By the time the cylinder was baked in 539, Cyrus held an empire that ran from the Aegean coast all the way to the foothills of the Hindu Kush, and from the Caucasus down to the Persian Gulf, the largest political unit the world had ever seen. And in every province, the local elites kept their gods, their language, and most of the time, their jobs. 100 years after Cyrus was dead, the Persians had a saying. Darius was a shopkeeper because he counted everything. Cambyses was a despot because he beat his slaves. Cyrus was a father because he was kind. In the year 531 BC, with the empire at peace and his elder son Cambyses already trained as his successor, Cyrus did a thing that no one in the world expected. He left. He left Babylon. He crossed the high plateau. He kept going east until he reached a wide brown river running down out of the Anshan into colder, emptier country than he had ever been in. The Greeks called the river the Araxes. The local name was probably Jaxartes. We now call it the Syrdaria. Beyond it, the steppe. The people on the other bank were the Massagetae, a horse nomad confederation. They drank fermented mare's milk. They buried their dead under heaped earth. A generation later, Herodotus questioned Persian veterans about them and wrote down what he learned. Their spear points and arrowheads were brass. The rims of their helmets were gold. Their belts were gold. So was the chasing on the breasts of their horses. They wore the cold like a second skin. They were ruled in this generation by a woman, Tomyris. Her husband was dead. She ruled in her own right. Cyrus sent her, through his ambassadors, a marriage proposal. According to Herodotus, he did not really want her. He wanted her kingdom. Tomyris understood that perfectly and refused. He ordered his engineers to throw a bridge across the river. Tomyris sent a second message. "Withdraw 3 days' march," she said, "and we will fight you on your side of the river. Or stay where you are, and we will come and fight you on ours. But do not build a bridge in our country." Cyrus called a council of war. The Persian advisors voted to withdraw and meet the Massagetae on the empire's own ground. The old man from Lydia, Croesus, who had once been the richest king on earth and was now an advisor on a small horse, voted to cross. He opened with a line that would have stopped any other man in Cyrus's place. "Reflect, O king, on the changes of human fortune." Then he told Cyrus exactly how to take the step. Set out a banquet on the empty bank, full of wine. The Massagetae drink only milk. They will not refuse the wine. Leave the worst of your soldiers there as a sacrifice. Take the rest with you and circle back when the nomads come down to drink. It was a strange speech. The man who had once told Cyrus that no man is happy while he lives now handed him the trick that would carry him across his last river. Cyrus took the advice. He crossed. On the far bank, far from his own roads, he set out the camp with wine. The Massagetae did not know wine. They drank only milk. Cyrus pulled the main body of his army a day's march into the steppe and waited. The bait he left behind was three things: a feast already laid out on the tables, the slowest and weakest of his soldiers to play at defending it, and jars of wine. The detachment that came down on the camp was led by Tomyris' son, a young man named Spargapises. They broke the thin guard. They sat down at the abandoned tables. They had never tasted anything like the wine. They drank. They drank everything. The sun came up and found them asleep in the grass, with the cups still in their hands. Cyrus came back. None of them woke. He took Spargapises alive. It is a small thing, set against everything he had done. A trick on a tribe that did not know wine. But the men who had ridden with him for 30 years would have noticed. Persian boys, Herodotus tells us, were taught three things: to ride, to draw the bow, to tell the truth. The man who had spared Astyages, who had taken Croesus down off the pyre, who had walked into Babylon under a path of green branches, had pretended to abandon a camp in order to kill drunk men in their sleep. He had broken the third lesson on the steppe. Spargapises came to in a Persian tent. It took him a slow moment to come back to himself. He saw the Persian standards on the canvas above him. He understood, slowly, that he was the king's son in the king's enemy's camp, and that his men were dead in their sleep on the grass outside. He took his own life rather than live as a captive. Tomyris was in her camp when the messenger reached her. She did not weep. She sent Cyrus a final letter, which Herodotus preserves almost word for word. Glutton for blood, she wrote, "Do not boast of what you have done. With vine fruit, which makes you mad when you swallow it, with this poison you took my son, not by valor in the fight. Now take this counsel from me, give me back my son, and leave my land unharmed. If you will not, I swear by the sun, Lord of the Massagetae, that I will give you your fill of blood, glutton as you are." Cyrus did not give back the body. He took his main army across the steppe to meet hers. Herodotus says, the battle that followed was the fiercest the barbarians had ever fought among themselves. It started with arrows. When the arrows ran out, the two sides went for javelins, then swords and short axes from horseback. And then, when the Persians had broken at last under sheer numbers, hand to hand on the trampled grass, most of the Persian army died there. Cyrus died with them. He was 69 or 70 by then. No source tells us by whose hand. Behind him, the empire he had built in 30 years stood untouched. He had died entirely outside it. Tomyris came across the field at evening, looking for one body. When she found it, she kept her promise. She had told him in writing that she would give him his fill of blood, and that was what she did. "Glutton," she said, "drink your fill." What he had built outlasted him. The empire stood, and in every province, the local elites kept their gods and their language. The kind of king he had been, the one who let the conquered keep what was theirs, would be read and copied for 25 centuries by people who never knew him and who would not have wanted to fight beside him. Solon had said it long ago. No man is happy while he lives. Only when his life is finished can we judge it. Cyrus's life was finished now. He had ridden further than any king before him, and he did not come home alive. But history has remembered him more kindly than almost any conqueror who came after. A king who, by the hard standards of his age, took the world with a rare and unusual mercy. Not many who take so much are remembered that way